So part of cooking and being in the kitchen, there is a lot of health and safety and sanitation around what we do. So for my home cooks, you may want to skip this chapter. For all my students, you're going to want to really immerse yourself in this chapter, and you definitely will be tested on most all of this. So buckle up. Here we go. We're going to have a lot of fun with food safety knowledge. I know that I have some returning students, so for some of you, this is going to be a really healthy review. So we're going to kick off with hygiene, really understanding that our personal hygiene has a lot to do with everything we do in the kitchen. Making sure that our uniforms are clean, that we don't have jewelry that can fall off and into the food, that we don't have nail polish on or fake nails, and understanding that, you know, a physical hazard can come out of your hair in the form of a rubber band. A physical hazard example would be an earring, a thread, or a button popping off. You always want to make sure that your spit spot and everything's nice and tidy, and just like mise en place with prep, that everything is in its place when it comes to your hair and any accessories and your uniform. All right, so our health and our hygiene, preparation, storage, handling, prevention, cleaning, sanitation, all of that is part of our health and sanitation. Personal hygiene and attire, which we just talked about, also goes into your aprons and your towels that you have on your board. You can always have a dry towel in the kitchen, but all of your sanitation towels need to be in a bucket in sanitation underneath your prep area. This towel needs to be clean, and if it's dirty, it just needs to go under and go in the bucket. And also you can have a clean towel on your apron around you for your hands. This is the only places that they can be. Hand washing. Da-da-da-da. What do they call that? Jazz hands? Jazz hands? Jazz hands. Come on, Traylon, do it with me. Jazz hands. Everyone's doing jazz hands. I wish you guys could see it. Okay, so you got to keep these puppies clean. Everything that's going on with COVID, flu season coming up, being in the kitchen, underneath your nails, in your cuticles, the backs of your hands, removing jewelry when you're washing your arms all the way up. It is so important to keep your hands clean. And I think we all know that when you're washing your hands, you can just sing happy birthday 3 times fast, and that tells you how long it takes to, you know, to really clean your hands and get that bacteria off. So, washing your hands prevents cross-contamination. You definitely want to wash your hands after you've prepared poultry or even a vegetable, cantaloupe, fruit. You want to make sure that you are always washing your hands when you're switching between any prep job. And before you touch any foods, and then after going to the restrooms, you're absolutely going to wash your hands. Employee health. It is absolutely essential that if you are not feeling well, if you have a cough, just even a scratch in your throat, slight fever, you don't get to go to work, ever. You need to call your employer, you need to let them know and take the day off, and you're going to need 24 hours until you can come back to your workplace. You always want to make sure that any cuts or burns, any nicks or grazes, one, you should always report it. If you have to go get a Band-Aid, you need to let your employer know. They have to file an incident report, even for something super small, because it could lead to an infection. And if somebody gets sick, it's a way for us to trace things. So make sure that you let the employer know right away and that an incident report is filed. We're going to get into food hazards. So everybody wake up, have another sip of your coffee. All right, so our 4 food hazards. Allergens, biological. I'm hoping you guys are doing it with me right now because you remember them. Chemical and physical. So we had an acronym in class, A, B, C, N, P. That way you can remember them just a little bit better. So your allergens, your biological, your chemical, and your physical. So what are these? So let's start with biological. We know that biological has to do with bacteria, fungi, parasites, and viruses. Those are all examples of what a biological hazard is. And there are ways to prevent food-borne illnesses and food poisoning from all of these by being safe and not cross-contaminating and understanding your food sources. Did it come from a farm? Did it come from a vendor? Did it come from a grocery store? What is it? How do I store it? How do I clean it? How do I treat it? So from biological hazards, we're going to go right into chemical hazards. So if you think about a chemical hazard, it's right in the title. So anything from oven spray to too much Sani to dish soap to clipped enamel off of a pan, metal ice cube trays, which hopefully nobody has those anymore, silverware polish, not really, the server's not getting that polish off, and obviously a guest uses the fork or spoon and consumes that chemical. And then also things like metal shavings, insects, broken hard plastic from a blender that you're prepping with. It's happened in the kitchen. It's awful. It's just awful when it happens and a guest comes up to you and they have a bit of plastic from a Cuisinart or a Vitamix. These things happen and you have to be mindful, attentive, and incredibly aware at all times. If you are a professional in the kitchen, if you're just starting and you want to get into a commercial kitchen, this is fantastic for you to know. Be mindful, be aware, sometimes slow down, take a beat, and really understand your surroundings and watch what you're doing. So then we get into allergens. So on your allergens, there are many people that are allergic to many different things. There are also people who are just sensitive. And it is up to your front of the house to really make the back of the house and the cooks aware of what our guests are allergic to or what they are sensitive to. And when we have this, we take it very seriously. If someone comes into the restaurant and they tell you that they're celiac, that means that they can't have any form of wheat, that they're going to have a really, really adverse reaction. So what you would do is you would actually take a piece of parchment, you would put it down, and you would start making their gluten-free, grain-free sandwich on that parchment. You would never physically put it on your board. So again, these are steps you want to take to really protect your guests, because your guests are everything to us, aren't they? Right? And we treat them like family. We want them to know when they come in that we care enough to keep them safe. Another allergen is crustacean, fish, soybean, all kinds of different nuts, eggs, peanuts, milk. A lot of people, sesame seeds, a lot of people think that cashews are not part of nuts. Cashews, although not a nut, are definitely a huge allergen for a lot of different people. And then of course your wheats. All right. So your top allergens, in order: milk, soybean, peanut, shellfish, fish, tree nuts, eggs, and wheat, in that order. So again, understanding them really helps you know what our dietary trends are right now. So if someone is celiac, something you might want to offer them is going to be gluten-free bread or a grain-free bread. Normally grain-free would also be gluten-free. It's kind of like a double whammy. But also you might have someone who just has a gluten sensitivity. So with a gluten sensitivity, something that I like to recommend is that you're careful with your grains or your coffee that you're giving the guests, because sensitivities also stem from mold. So mycotoxins tend to get into grain. Let me show you. So understanding that our grains, just like the coffee bean, Traylon's going to get us a coffee bean. They have these, we'll have to get a close-up for you, but there's these little granules. So the thing that happens with our grains is that mold will get in there, and it's a mycotoxin from that family. And it gets into your gut and it wreaks havoc. And a lot of people who are sensitive to gluten, it's actually the molds in coffee and the molds in grain. You can just throw it. We're in class. I've got great students. They're not even going to mind this. Instant coffee. So, again, we're going to get close-ups of these. But if you think about your coffee bean and your grains and how mold can get into these guys, that's where you're going to get a lot of your sensitivity. You guys, this is cool. I'm sorry. This stuff is super, super cool. Because when you understand your food and what can get in your food or how people react to their food, your knowledge is so much broader, and you're keeping yourself, your coworkers, and your guests safe. So we can take from allergens, we can take a step into the deep water and start analyzing our grains and our coffees a little bit more to understand how people have sensitivities. Now with that, please understand, I skipped over it pretty fast, even organic coffees and even organic grains can have a bit of mold in them. And there's many roasters out there that said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, the pesticides, we just roast it out. You cannot roast a chemical like pesticide or an herbicide that is in the ground, that is in the soil, that is already in the fiber of that plant in that root system, and then that whole plant has grown. You can't roast that out. So I'm sorry, but you're wrong as a roaster if that's what you're telling people. And the same with your grains. You cannot roast that out. So there's a little lesson in organic and non-organic, and then with mycotoxins and molds and sensitivities to gluten and grains. And I hope I didn't bore you too much in that, but I think knowledge is power, right? When it comes to food, because food is totally your guests' medicine and yours and your family's. All right, we got stuck in allergens. Of course we did. It's actually my favorite. All right, so you have harmful bacteria. Okay, bacteria is like Star Wars. You've got the Sith Lord and you got Princess Leia. All right, so you have the good and the bad side, the dark side. So your harmful bacteria will totally wreak havoc on your system, on your guests, in your food, right? They multiply super fast. They love a moist, hot environment. Blech. That's where a lot of food poisoning comes from. Now your beneficial bacteria, amazing for your gut. Your gut is full of a Star Wars scene. You've got your good and your bad side. You have this beautiful flora happening in your gut. That is good bacteria that keeps you alive, that has this conversation with your brain, that keeps your blood flowing and keeps your blood clean. It does so much for you. And it really is, this right here, a super clean gut, is that connectivity that keeps you healthy, keeps your immunity strong. So we want to remember things like this. As cooks, we have a responsibility, what we put on the plate. So that going back to bacterias, there's a lot of beneficial and then there's harmful. You need to know the difference. You need to study up on that. And I think as a project for all of you, I'd like you to come back next week with a sentence on what harmful bacteria is and a sentence on what beneficial bacteria is, and then we can have that discussion. So a lot of beneficial bacteria you can get in the form of sauerkraut, fermented foods, your probiotics, things like that are fantastic for the human body. So undesirable bacteria, like let's have that conversation. So these little dudes are responsible for your food spoilage. When you get bad bacteria, and they're the ones that are going to give you that odor, that slimy, sticky, film surface on your chicken, that's when you know that you have a bad bacteria, that you have a problem. But I always like to say, and we're going to put this up on the screen, when in doubt, throw it out. So one more time with me. When in doubt, throw it out. Disease-causing bacteria or pathogens. These are bacteria that cause most foodborne illnesses. That bacteria that we're most concerned with is a pathogen, right? So pathogenic bacteria will come from improper hygiene, not being sanitary around your food handling, and then not having timely storage. Did you leave it out too long? Is it hot and you put it in the fridge and it didn't cool down fast enough? Did you, take a cantaloupe that was just brought in from your purveyor and you did not clean it, and then you skinned it, peeled all the, all the rind off, and you put the flesh on your board, well, you just cross-contaminated that. So you have to think about that melon, that skin, and all the folds, right? So that just came from a farm, and it has some stuff in it. I'm not going to say what all that nasty stuff is, but there's some nasty stuff in it. So that's also where a pathogen can come from. That's why food handling, cleaning, and storage is so important. Okay, so there's 3 basic principles around protection against bacteria. We're going to stay in this just a little longer. You want to keep bacteria from spreading. That's number 1. You want to stop bacteria from growing, and you want to kill bacteria. So how do we do this? So a way to kill bacteria is to not let any food be cross-contaminated, right? So from raw chicken to putting a carrot on the board and then cutting that carrot, putting it in a salad and serving someone. There you go. That's the best example I could give you. Stop bacteria from growing. You want to take away the conditions in which bacteria can grow. And so that means a really hot kitchen, you've got food out, you've left it out for hours and hours. Well, your bacteria is multiplying by the hundreds of thousands. And just like that. And then you're going to cook it to 135 degrees, but it should have been cooked to 165 because it's poultry. There you go. You just got someone really, really ill. So again, these are protections against these bacteria and how we can stop them from spreading. We go to number 3, kill bacteria. Most disease-causing bacteria are killed if they are subject to a temperature of more than 170 degrees. So you're starting to see where we're going to go to next. We're going to go into temperatures next. So time and temperature has a lot to do with killing bacteria and not getting your guests sick. Bacterial diseases, and then we'll get into time and temp. So we have viruses, parasites, mold, and yeast. So those are 3 of our bacterial diseases that can take place. And then many of you, again, that have been with me before, you know that whole list: norovirus, salmonella, E. coli, listeria. Not fun. We want to stay away from those. And again, that goes back to prevention, being mindful, and being clean. All right, so time and temperature abuse, that's what we're getting into. So many of you remember FATTOMS. So that's an acronym for F for food, A for acid, T for time, T for temperature, O for oxygen, and M for moisture. Those are our FATTOMS, and this is a way that we can create a safe environment by understanding our time and temperatures. They can be abused. We don't want them to be abused. Understanding acid, understanding your moisture and your time allotments on all of that are essential. So, assignment number 2, please look up FATTOMS and tell me what food, acid, time, temperature, oxygen, and moisture. Tell me what all of those are. There's a sentence for each and every one of them. Hey gang, what a better way to talk about time and temperature abuse, the danger zone, than in a live commercial kitchen. Say hi, everybody. Hi. Keep everybody on their toes. Okay, so your danger zone is 41 degrees to 140 degrees. That's the zone that you do not want your food to ever be in. So one of the things that we always need to remember is how we're holding food, how we're cooling food, and then how we're bringing food in. So a couple of our reminders is make sure that your source is always reliable. You always know where your food is from, because that tells you how it's being held before it actually gets to your kitchen. Because if your food's at 140, 150 plus here in the kitchen, that's wonderful. But when it's coming from a source, sometimes it's been in trucks, right? Or possibly another warehouse that you're not aware of. And it could be in that danger zone. So that's why you want to know your source. You want to know that it's a reliable source and that they are caring for your food products before they hit your kitchen. Another important note is to make sure that you always have your temp gauge and that you're always logging your temperatures. We like to log temps in our kitchen every 2 hours. A rule of thumb is every 4, but why not keep it super safe and do it every 2, right? And then when you're bringing foods in, you want to make sure that you're storing them immediately, that they're going in the that they're getting cleaned and then going in the walk-in or the freezer right away, that they're not sitting out. When we're defrosting food, you never want to defrost food by just having it on the counter and letting it sit there. You're going to defrost it either in your walk-in or you can defrost it under cool running water. All right, so let's check out a temp log and let's check out what it looks like holding food 140 plus on the line. All right, what's next? Keeping food safe. We continue to make sure, and I just want to reiterate, keeping food safe is our number one way to keep our guests and ourselves safe. And again, getting into any kind of a flu season, any of this can deteriorate and really wreak havoc on your immunity, your immune system. So again, I will just keep pushing this home. It's really important that we're super safe. We want to chill and refrigerate food promptly. We want to make sure everything's clean, from our utensils to our boards to ourselves. We want to cook everything to its correct temperature, and we want to separate, meaning we do not want to cross-contaminate. My chicken's over here, my vegetables are over here, etc. Okay. Food danger zone. Food danger zone is something we talk about even at home. I have an elderly mother, I have a younger daughter, and I'm always concerned with making sure that things are cooked to their proper temperature. Time and temps, food that has not been cooked to the proper degree or is held at an inadequate temperature or have not been reheated properly, those are out of your time and temp. So your temperatures, so now we're going to go over proper temperatures and make sure you're holding food correctly and that you've cooked food to the temperature that it should be. And this isn't a joke. If you want to have a piece of chicken at 155, 145 degrees, that's on you. You do it, you're at home, you're cooking for yourself. You don't do it for someone who's elderly, you don't do it for someone's young, and you damn well don't do it when you're in a professional kitchen. So our poultry and all of our stuffed meats, so any turkeys or chickens that you're stuffing, or prochettas, your pork, all of that has to be cooked to 165 degrees. You can pull it from the oven at 155 to 158 because it will continue to cook to 165, but you then have to take your thermometer and you have to make sure that you go into that core and that you're at the right temperature each and every time. Ground and injected meats have to be at 155 degrees. Your steaks, your chops, your roasts, those are always at 145. Again, you can pull them about 5 degrees lower. They'll finish cooking when you bring them out. And then let's get into cooling so it's an interesting thing with cooling. So again, you have a tray of chicken breast bone-in that you just took out of the oven. How long is that going to take to cool, and to what temperature does it have to cool, and how long is that going to take? That's something that we have to be knowledgeable about, and that's something that I want you to look up and report back to me. So cold, basically your foods start cooling. You got your first stage and your second stage. Within 2 hours, or using an ice bath, right? I don't know how many kitchens these days have chill blasters, but you can cool within 2 hours using an ice bath, and you're going to bring it down to about 70 degrees. So the second stage, you need to then bring it within a 4-hour period to 40 degrees. So we're going to go to 70 within 2 hours, and then we're going to go to 40 within another 4 hours, okay? And we can definitely have a review on that, and I'm happy to take any questions when we have class and when I join you for class. So now we're going to talk a little bit about time control safety. So we just went through our fat toms. We went through understanding storage and bacteria and times and temperature and how to cool, right? So we know what temperatures our meat and our produce and all that needs to be at when you pull it from the oven. And then we know how to bring the temperatures down within that 2-hour period or that 4-hour period. So you're going to go from 70 degrees to 40. So we know all that. So now we're going to talk about time control and then the safety around it. So things that are most vulnerable and are at always the top of my list are things like garlic or herbs in an oil that needs to be refrigerated. You don't get to keep that out. Meats and poultry, melons. Melons are a really big deal because of what the skin can hold and bring in from a farm and then cross-contaminate. And not only that, if your health inspector comes in the kitchen, the first thing he's going to do is he's going to take this probe and he's going to put it right into the middle of that piece of melon in your fruit salad, in your deli case, or wherever it is, and then that has to be at its proper temperature. So get ready for that. Your diced tomatoes, tofu sprouts, rice and beans. Rice, beans, melon at the top of the list, what can get people sick if it's not at the right temperature. So I'm giving you this list so you have a little bit of that information and you can be prepared and you can start to study your time control safety around foods that are more vulnerable. All right, so cooling procedures, because even after storage, I'm going to keep bringing a couple lessons back to you so I can really get you to remember these things. So we're going to go back to cooling temperatures. So cooling temperature, the rate at which foods cool depends on their total volume. So hopefully you understand that. So it's how big things are or how small they are. So cooling food, you want to cool hot food from 135 to 70 degrees within a 2-hour window, 135 to 40 within a 4-hour window, and then the faster the food is cooled, the safer we are and the better the food is. You always want to maintain your stored food in the walk-in, the refrigerator, at 41 degrees. And then obviously your frozen food needs to be frozen. Need I say any more? All right, so hot food handling. You always want to maintain hot food at 135 degrees or above. Properly cooked roasts may be held at 130 degrees. That's out for slicing and giving to guests. And then reheating foods. You want to reheat food to 165 degrees within 15 seconds. That rapid induction of heat and reheating is going to help kill any bacteria, harmful bacteria that is in the food. So food made in a food processing plant, opened in a food establishment and reheated for hot holding must reach a temperature of 135. So if you're getting food that's like a soup that's already in a bag or lasagna that's already, we don't do it at Eat, but if you get it in a crate, you have to make sure that you're reheating that to a temperature of plus 135. You always want to reheat your foods rapidly. I'm just going to say that again, okay? And then you can serve any of these foods immediately. You don't want to let them sit and then serve them. Serve them immediately. All right, so last and not least, we're going to just talk a little bit about cleaning and sanitizing of your equipment, making sure that you're using all of the right chemicals, even if they're organic chemicals that are in your dish department, understanding them, understanding your 3-compartment sink, understanding your dishwasher, if it's a low temp or a high temp, and how it works. It is, that's the heartbeat of the kitchen. Your dish crew, so you want to know what they know and you want to make sure you're help supporting them by bringing in things and organizing it and then making sure that when you get things back, you're another set of eyes that things are coming back to you clean. All right, so now we're going to get to a summary. I just want to remind everybody that we had 2 assignments that we're going to discuss when we meet, so please don't forget about those. And then we'll get into a quick food summary here. A summary, not a food summary, a whole summary. Okay, so in review of health and sanitation, it's not only important to remember the danger zone and TCS, it's also important to remember all of the many things we talked about. So I know that was kind of a put you to sleep course over the past 30 minutes, but everybody wake up, stretch, do a little yoga, have a sip of coffee, I don't care. In review, and I'm going to want you to know these things, our food hazards, right? Our A, B, C, and P. So our allergens, biological, chemical, physical hazards, those are things that can be a hazard in the kitchen. Our 4 kinds of microorganisms. So our fungi, our viruses, parasites, bacteria, And that's one of the crucial things about the danger zone. We remember that from 40 to 140 degrees, because your bacteria can multiply at the speed of light, which is why we want to keep foods out of that danger zone. Bacteria to know, we know that we have a harmless bacteria, that beautiful flora that's in your gut that keeps you nice and safe and boosts your immune system. But then there's bacteria that are not beneficial. Those are our undesirable bacteria. Don't forget our rule. When in doubt, throw it out. Then you've got our fat toms, right? Pathogens need the following 6 conditions in which to live. So you have that acronym FATTOM, which stands for food, acidity, temperature, time, oxygen, and moisture. Food danger zone. Again, 40 to 140 degrees. Some people will argue 41 to 135, but let's be safe and keep it between 40 and 140. Potential hazardous foods, otherwise known as time control safety, and making sure that we're understanding that clearly, and the foods around TCS that need to stay safe. So protection against bacteria, there's one great rule of thumb. There's actually 3 basic principles. So you want to keep bacteria from spreading. That's always my one rule of thumb. But then you can stop bacteria from growing by having your food in the right temperature, by defrosting food correctly, by knowing your reliable sources and how to store. Bacteria diseases, again, viruses, parasites, mold, and yeast. And then contributing factors to unsafe food is really important, gang. So I'd love to see you maybe do a project around this. We'll have to figure out when we're in class what that's going to be. So remember, it's your personal hygiene, from jewelry to fake nails to polish, to loose buttons on your jacket. You'd be surprised what can fall into food when you're cooking at the speed of light. Receiving food from unsafe food sources, we've talked about that a lot. Time and temperature abuse, cross-contamination, and then contaminated equipment, keeping your equipment clean. Keeping food safe. Food storage, food handling and preparation, rodent, insect control, cleaning and sanitizing equipment, personal hygiene, and food storage. We repeat ourselves a lot, but that is the summary of health and sanitation in the kitchen, and it's really important to be up on that whether you're at home. We've talked about whether you're cooking for the seniors in your community or your home, your family, and when you're in a commercial kitchen, it's essential to know each and every one of these. So I hope you're still with me, and we'll see you next time with Kitchen Essentials. All right, take care.